plus our special guest. In the meantime, let us know where you're tuning in from, what you're drinking. I've, in the spirit of things, I've got my raw Easthope Pinot Noir here, which I'm looking forward to trying. Ray, have you got anything tasty yourself there?
I've got lots of things, so it'd be a prejudice to select one, because later this evening, just a quick plug, after this session, there'll be the Fine Wine Club session, or not Fine Wine Club, Fine Wine in general, with Stefano de Blasi and a special guest joining. And then later it's tasting with Johan Kruger and Renan Boorman, legend, lovely guys. So I've got those wines around me. They're being consumed individually. Yeah.
Lovely. Cool. And why don't we kick off? Ray, you're obviously an expert yourself. We announced last night your fantastic news from last week, becoming one of the world's 409 master of wines. Could you tell us your background, how you got into wine, and how you went down that path?
Yes, sure thing. I'll keep it snappy, but I was a lost cause, drifting from one place to another, and I ended up back in Dublin, and I was working in a restaurant, and there that team, just after work, we'd have a beer, and one guy, he'd just open some wines and taste this, Ray, taste that, and just the way the language he used, he started saying things like Corton Charlemagne and Puligny Montrachet, and I was like, that sounds cool. And they offered to put me on a wine course. So I said, yeah, I've got nothing else going on in my life. So I did the WSET, the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. I went in at the advanced, which was sort of like in at the deep end, but I fell in love with it. So I studied, and then I did a diploma, and then I moved to London, and I worked for Gordon Ramsay in his restaurant Maze, 1 Michelin star. That's on Grosvenor Square behind Bond Street Tube. And of course he has many, or had many, in London. And there I tasted almost, all the wines in the world that you'd want to: Mouton Rothschild, Petrus, Chateau Petrus, all the Burgundies, expensive, rare wines. Just a little sip, because you would show the bottle to the table. They'd say, yeah, that's the label. Then you take it away and you open it and make sure it's not corked, something that we'll talk about later. And so you have a little sip and then you pour it for them, but you got to taste all the wines. And it was just an incredible experience. Very hard work, but that was great. And then I went on to work for a wine competition, the International Wine Challenge. They'd have 12 or 13,000 bottles, 13,000 wines were entered into the competition, of which we have our own medals winners case, where we enter Decanter World Wine Awards and the International Wine Challenge. And we put together our best wines, our medal winning wines. And there, again, I would taste. And then I literally rang you, Eamon, and asked you for a job. And then you said, we don't really have a job going. And I was like, okay, I'll call you back in 3 weeks. And I did. And I said, hey, man, how's that job looking? He's like, okay, let's talk. And so I sort of shoehorned my way into Naked Wines. And it's the best thing that ever happened. I think today is the 9th. Yeah, I'm with Naked 8 years today.
Oh, happy anniversary. Yeah. All these good things happen to you at once.
Exactly. Like London buses. Yeah. And how about you, Emo? How did you get into wine?
That's a good question. I went back to probably my teenage years. We used to always go on holidays in France. My dad was an amateur wine collector, nothing fancy, just fill the boot up on the way home from the holidays. Looked at one child in the back seat and said I could fish 6 more cases in that space. And you could see the question genuinely going through his mind. Thankfully, he brought us all back. So I was always, in and around at books in the house and stuff. And then I worked in a wine shop through uni. And then I went on my career in a graduate consulting program for 3 years out of uni at Accenture, a big management consulting firm. But I always had this itch to get into wine. It was my passion. So I started a wine blog called My Grape Escape. Yeah. So I was consultant by day, blogger by night, which sounds very daring and exciting, much more than it actually was.
Is that what Julian Assange started? No relevance. Okay, go on. Sorry.
And yeah, that took me to London, my job, the day job. And then I got this voucher in a mailing for this company called Naked Wines. So I'd signed up and liked the wines. I went to a wine tasting and wrote a review of the tasting on my blog the next day. And then suddenly an email pops into my inbox from Rowan Gormley saying, hey, I liked your blog. Do you want to come in and have a chat? And convincing guy, 4 months later, I was working for him. And that was 9.5 years ago.
Wow.
And yeah, likewise, just can't believe the journey that we've been on and continue to have. So
Yeah. Yeah, it is such it's a joy, but I mean, without being too taken up, it's an honor, but it's just such a privilege to work with Naked. Like the team, everyone who's putting this session, this tour together, everyone that builds the website, everyone that, it's sort of, you're vetoed by, are you a good egg? Yes. Okay, pass. And it's only good eggs, and it's a lovely place to work. We're very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So Ray, one of the questions I am most frequently asked, or the situation I'm most put in, is how do you pick a wine off a wine list in a restaurant? And as someone who knows his wines, how do you go about it?
Okay. So the second cheapest theory is that works, but there are many restaurants and there are many wine lists. So this following response does not fit all, but I think, if possible, speak to the person, the waiter, the owner. If there's a sommelier, great, but we don't all eat in restaurants that where there are sommeliers. But let's say it's I don't even know if these chains exist anymore, but a Zizi or something, where a pizza chain, where they might not be as well informed. I would just say, the house wine can be fantastic in a restaurant that puts as much, when they're putting lots of love into their menu. You can see that, before you book online, you look at the menu and you see the detail. And those people are gourmands or culinary, lovers, and they care. And they actually, they're putting out this food that they did all the sourcing from and all the cooking and all the trials, and then they're putting it out, and they want it to show on its best light. So they put the best crockery and so on. But the thing that's going down their mouth at the same time is wine. So those who have put attention into the menu, you can expect or hope that they will have put attention into their house wine, because the house wine is the badge, that we stand by this house wine. So house wine can be good. In another place where they're just knocking out pizzas on a chain, the house wine, or the first and second wines might not be great. And thereafter, I'm afraid to say, if you pay more, hopefully you'll get it right. I'll tell you one wine where you rarely go too wrong, but Côte de Rhône, it's just soft and round, and it's great with pizza, actually. So that would be the safest advice without any legal accusations. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I find similar to that, like Kiwi Sauvignon tends to be fairly consistent. Yeah. Malbecs, again, in one of those places. And then, when you go to somewhere nicer for maybe a nice occasion, if they've got a sommelier or someone who heads up the wine list, I will always ask them. I look at a bunch of names that I have no idea of, where I've heard from or know them here or there, but actually the person who's put that list together, and they're very often on your side as well. They've no interest in trying to upsell you or rip you off or anything. Exactly. So if you explain what you're eating, what sort of wines you like, they actually see that as a challenge and a real favorite part of their job, isn't it? To let them discover discover wines that people are going to enjoy.
Exactly. It's a passion to have the vocation. It's a passion. So they are there to bring pleasure and happiness into your meal, and then they move on to the next person and their meal, and they invest a lot in themselves typically. So that's it. Ask the question, and maybe ask the owner if you can. Yeah.
And then say if you're at home, Ray, and cooking up a storm. I think you were enjoying a bit of lamb tonight. How do you pick what wines go with what sort of food? Are there any general rules or tips, or what do you think?
Okay, as a previous sommelier, I'm going to say something quite controversial. I just drink whatever the hell I want to drink. So for those who are
I think that's controversial.
Okay, and I think that's it. Yeah. Point A, don't overthink it. Do what you want. If it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. Moving on and sort of getting a bit more in depth, deeper in. In fact, we'll have Richard Kershaw. I keep plugging the next show, but Richard Kershaw will be joining us in the second show. He was a chef, and he's quite into his food and wine matching. But I would say, you have to think of it. So if you're thinking of drinking white wine, I think people will know this. You say fish and chicken, but if the chicken has been char grilled and it has what's that? Zoot or zouk is this sort of spice you can put on it, sort of like the Middle Eastern spices you can put over it. And I did some chicken with ras al hanout earlier. I was all kitchen up today, and there you go from, you move a white meat with a white wine to you move into a red territory. So it's basically strength of flavor is what it is. Pinot Grigio is very light, fresh, positively little flavor, you know, in that way. It's there for sort of refreshment and conversation, really. And there you go for things that are very light, like salad and maybe fish that is not grilled, fish that is poached. But once you grill the fish, you move up the ladder and you go into something a little stronger, like Vermentino or Chardonnay with a bit of oak. So on a high level, as a takeaway, I would just say, and this applies to the reds as well, strength of flavor. So char grilled, barbecue, steaks and reds, you're going for reds like Barossa Shiraz. You're going for things that are a bit bigger. And then other reds, you can have that fish with Beaujolais, Côte d'Rône, that sort of thing, because they're light, red, soft. And then how do you know if it's going to be light and red, a light red or a big red? Well, Naked Wines has very handy indicators on the side of the page or further down. It describes the style of the wine, and occasionally the winemaker will recommend a food pairing. So you have a bit of a steer that way. And then there's always Google. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I was always a bit of a skeptic with food and wine pairing on occasional trips with you, Ray, and others, like, sitting in a small, restaurant in northern Spain, eating lamb with washed down by Ribera del Duero red. You're just in heaven. They've gone together for centuries, and they just work. And then when I was in another time, I was on honeymoon with my wife Ruth, and obviously, and we were in this restaurant on the Amalfi Coast. We're looking to see. It was a seafood restaurant. I'm not a big fish. I wasn't at the time. I eat more fish now, but I just like, I'll order some fish. So order whatever fish they had. I was like, make sure it's fresh, and I'm not a big fish eater, but just make sure it's mild and light and everything. So it came out, and I ate this fish, and it was the fishiest fish you've ever eaten, and it was fresh and everything. It was just too much for me. I'm like, oh no, it's your one meal of the night. You want to make it special. I brought over the waiter, and I was like, here, mate, I don't like this. He's like, oh, I'll bring you a Pinot Grigio. I'm like, a Pinot Grigio, and I see Ruth kind of I got my back up, as I didn't want to say I work in wine or all that, but he's like, no, sir, please trust me. So he brings out this Pinot Grigio, and I drank it, and it totally changed the dish. It just made it come alive. Hey, Matt.
Hey, mate.
Totally changed my mind on food and wine matching. So yeah, if you can get the right pairing together, particularly local food with local wine, for me, it just blew my mind.
Fantastic. It looks
How's
like
it going, Matt?
Kiwi winemakers are like London buses. They all come at once. How's it going, guys?
Hey, I thought it would have been a bit of a softer start there, Ray. Just a nice introduction.
It's great to see you. You appeared on the corner of everyone's screen in a vineyard as anyone was talking about fish, and it was all a bit irregular. But it's great to see you. You're deep in harvest in California. Roderick, you're sipping down coffee at stupid o'clock in the morning in New Zealand. Is that right?
That's it.
Good man. Great to see
mate.
Welcome. Matt, I know you're a bit pushed on time, but thank you very much for joining us. I know things are a bit crazy over there. Tell us where you are and what's going on over there.
Yeah, sure. G'day to the Angels. I'm just starting to see some messages pop up. Yeah, so I'm out in the vineyard. I'm sorry if the reception's a bit crap, but that's kind of where we're at these days. It's harvest time here in California. And as Rod will know, every harvest has its challenges, and you kind of come into this with a bit of nervous anxiety, because it's the most exciting time of the year, but also, Mother Nature can throw a few things up in the air. So, but today, I'll go into that a bit more, but today I'm in one of my Napa cab vineyards. You can see, I'll try and show you actually. So this is some beautiful Napa cab. There you go. And just checking them all out. So I'm going around Napa today. I was up in Anderson Valley yesterday and doing the rounds and really just trying to schedule fruit in. But yeah, we've had some challenges this year. I don't know if the Angels are kind of caught up, but back in mid-August, we had something like 12,000 thunderbolts, which if that's not a sign from God, then what is? But that caused a number of fires throughout California. And and we had a heat wave as part of that. And so we've had a lot of fires through California, which hasn't been great. There's a lot of firefighters working hard, but that's kind of made us all a bit nervous about, the pending harvest. I mean, I've harvested since mid-August, so we're almost a month in now. But then the fires just seem to not abate. They've got some of them under control, and then there's some new fires that have popped up over the last sort of week. And so, there's just, unfortunately, there's quite a bit of smoke in the atmosphere. It was also really hot over the weekend. I think LA had its highest temperature ever. I think it was close to 50 Celsius, so 121 Fahrenheit. And that's kind of why I'm going around the Napa vineyards today, because obviously when the vines are sitting in that sort of heat, it would have been 45 out where I am. It's that really, hammers the vines. Cabernets are pretty tough, they kind of hang in there. They've got thick skins and stuff like that. Varieties like Pinot Noir suffer a lot more. But that's where we're at. But, it's 11:45 here, and you can kind of see in my background, that's it's kind of got a yellow hue to the day, and that's all of the smoke from these fires is basically blocking out the sun. So it's actually quite cool today. But yeah, so all of us winemakers are obviously a little bit anxious, a bit nervous about what's going on, but we're kind of going through a process of checking everything out and
He'll be back.
Lost him there.
He popped in and popped out a moment while we were chatting. So there we go.
There he is.
No, he's not.
Hey, Matt.
We got you, Matt.
Yeah. No, he's gone again.
Meanwhile, in New Zealand.
Rod, do you have any of that effect down where you are?
No, I've unfortunately got a lot of experience with bushfires and vineyards in Australia and South Africa, but that's a rare occurrence here in New Zealand. So we're...
Rod, your sound is gone for a moment, pal. The view is beautiful.
Yeah, I think I'm back up. Am I back up?
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay. Can you see me?
Can't see you, but
we can see Rod's back garden, which is pretty spectacular.
So sunrise in the background here. So we're 5 hours behind Matt in California. And you can't hear it, but in the background, I can hear the frost fans going across the river on neighboring vineyards. So while they're battling bushfires, we're battling frost events here. The frost fans have been going sort of every day for weeks now. So, so far, so good. Everyone's managed to get through the frosts, but we've still got a long season of frost events still to go. So the complete opposite of what Matt's dealing with right at the moment. Below 0 degrees, not 50 degrees centigrade.
Well, that's that nervous excitement, Rod.
Matt, a few people asking about the taste of smoke and wine and what effect would that have?
Well, not ideal. I mean, when I said that we're going through a process of, evaluating the grapes before we harvest them, I mean, that's the primary concern is what they call smoke taint in the grapes. So at the moment, like in the back of my car, there's a whole bunch of buckets. So today I'm collecting samples from all the vineyards that I plan to pick, and I'll do what they call a micro ferment, or crudely it's a bucket ferment. And over the last couple of weeks, I've done a lot of those, and I'm tasting each of those. And as I see an issue, then basically, then we meet with the grower and talk about it. I'm also sending into the laboratory for analysis from those bucket ferments. So you can send grape berries in for analysis, and they give you a couple of smoke indicators, of call it the level or the incidence. But I think that after a bucket ferment, when you send in a wine sample, it's much more accurate. So, but that's definitely top of mind, and that's really what I suppose causing most winemakers concern. But yeah, this is kind of harvest, you know, and these are the things that can happen. So you just got to manage through it, you know, and it's just a time to be really pragmatic, you know.
Yeah, and I guess
not lose your shit.
I guess, you know, time will tell in terms of the total impact on the region, but you know, whatever that is adds to an already tough year for a lot of winemakers out there.
Yeah, it's been I mean, it's kind of like you know, you've got the whole coronavirus thing going on, and that's already proving some challenges, and everyone's had challenges, but this is definitely another layer to it. So yeah, but you know, fingers crossed we're going to style through. So we can only hope. Yeah.
Cool. Well, listen, thanks, Matt, for joining us. I know you got a bolt, and you're seeing growers and everything. So appreciate you joining in for an update.
Yeah, cheers to all. Hey, and grab my bottle of Contra Costa Rosé too. It just came in. It's online. So. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing. You've got to enjoy it. So anyway, cheers. Hey, cheers, Rod. Cheers, Ray. Cheers to you all.
Thanks,
Make
Matt.
it easy.
All the best.
See you, Matt.
Eamon and Rod, I might leave you both in each other's good hands as I prepare for the next session at 8 o'clock with Stefano de Blasi. So it's great to see you, Rod. Beautiful view from your place. And have fun, guys. Catch you later.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ray.
Cheers.
Bye, Ray.
Cool. All right, Rod. So it's straight into wine Q&A. People will probably wonder why all of it seems like all of New Zealand wines and probably Australian wines arrive in a screw cap. Why is that and why do other countries favour cork?
I think we would like to think that we were ahead of the game. A lot of people, the major change happened in the late 90s, and the seminal moment was 2001 here in New Zealand and in the Clear Valley in Australia, where all of the Marlborough producers got together to form an association, and the same thing happened in the Clear Valley in Australia. And they decided they were sick of this small piece of bark from Portugal or Spain tainting their wine, and up to sort of 5 to 7% were the estimates at the time that were wines being affected by cork taint. And that taint is a compound most commonly called TCA or trichloroanisole, and it just smells like moldy old cardboard. And you only need a few nanograms per litre to ruin the wine. So winemakers just became sick of that. You put so much work into the vineyard and into the wine, travel to the other side of the world, open up the bottle of wine to serve to a client, and it's corked. It's a heartbreaking moment for a winemaker, and a heartbreaking moment often for a consumer if they've spent good money on a bottle of wine. So screw caps are inert. Everything we say on the back label about the vineyard, the work we've done in the winery, that sort of thing is preserved by a screw cap. And you know, there's always been doubts with screw caps as to whether you need some oxygen ingress through the medium of something like a cork that does have a degree of porosity and some gaps down the side of the cork that allow some oxygen in, and whether that is essential for a wine to age. And it would be fair to say in the beginning there were some teething problems with screw caps, and that we thought we had to protect the wine so much because we had done with cork. And with screw cap, you don't need to. You can go with slightly lower sulfur levels in the wines, slightly higher dissolved oxygen levels, and the wine matures beautifully if you get all those parameters right. So we had to adjust, and in the first few years under screw cap, you could have a few wines that we would term as reductive. And what that means is they're just closed in upon themselves and had run out of oxygen, and then you get these reductive characters, most often characterized like burnt match or flinty sulfide-like characters. But it's very, very rare to come across a wine under screw cap that way anymore, as we've learnt to use that closure. I think also the fact that you may need a cork is certainly for a fine, full-bodied dry red wine to age perfectly. This category of wine represents you know, such a tiny percentage of what consumers do with wine. Most people, most wine is consumed within 12 hours of purchase. So how well it ages under cork is often an academic thing that you're reading on the back label and means nothing to the consumer while they're drinking that wine that they bought that day. So in those instances, which happens to be most instances, a screw cap is just a much better option.
Very good. Well, one wine in the screw cap I'm enjoying tonight is your 2017 Martinborough Pinot. And I got a question for you around Pinot Noir, actually. So often disappoints. Are there, you know, is there a secret to making great Pinots, or any certain places in the world you can make it? What's your approach to tackling this very fickle, but when you get it right, it's spectacular, great variety?
The secret's all in the growing and the site selection. The winemaking doesn't deviate a hell of a lot from any other red grape. It's all about extracting what you can from those skins and those and the pulp, keeping it fresh, putting it in some appropriate barrels, that sort of thing. So the real challenge with Pinot Noir comes in the vineyard, and it's a heartbreak grape because it has very thin skins. And it's the skins of the grape, like Matt was just mentioning with Cabernet in California, how tough it is. It can stand up to a lot of the elements because it's got a thick skin, and the skin has the tannins. Tannins are what protects the grape from pests, pestilence, disease. Pinot Noir's got a very thin skin, and so that layer of protection is very, very weak. So when you get some inclement weather at the wrong time, it can fall to bits very, very quickly on the vine. So site selection comes down to be the key animal. It doesn't like too much heat either, so the delicate aromatics of Pinot Noir can just evaporate away in the presence of extreme heat. So generally cooler climates, soils that have enough water but drain quite well. So it sets up quite a small crop. Small crop tends to translate into slightly tougher Pinot Noir that can handle the elements. Hence, Pinot Noir generally is a few dollars more expensive per bottle, and that just comes back to the yield in the vineyard every time. So less grapes, the more expensive they are. So yeah, it's a heartbreak grape, but it's also the holy grail for a lot of winemakers. Is they can't help themselves with the challenge if some good Pinot Noir grapes come their way. From a financial point of view and a winery sustainability point of view, Pinot Noir is not a great choice, but winemakers once you've had your first great red Burgundy, the seed is often planted, and it's tilting at windmills a lot of the time, but you just have to accept that challenge to try and make a great Pinot Noir from outside of Burgundy, and that's why so many winemakers try. Lots fail, but it takes a lot of determination just to keep going. But it's an insatiable bug once you've got it in your system.
Oh, we're certainly very happy we've got your Pinot on board, Rod. Got a question here from Melanie. How exactly do you know what temperature to serve wine at? So I don't know if you've got a wine fridge, obviously that helps, but if you don't have that, any kind of general rules and what to do there?
Yeah, I may differ from the classical advice. You know, you'll pick up those big tome books in your bookstores that have, you know, very accurate serving advice on this wine at this temperature and that sort of thing. And what I find is the only thing that can happen to a wine once it comes out of a fridge is that it warms up. And so that's my word of caution. Always start. And the worst thing that can happen to a wine is it's too warm to drink. So that's not going to happen once you take it out of the fridge. It's not going to get warmer. So err on the side of being too cool. Eamon, if you could hold up your glass there, that you've got the big, large Zalto glass there. That's my key advice when it comes to serving temperature. Get some nice, large glassware. It doesn't mean you have to pour yourself a lot, but start with it too cool and allow the wine to warm up. And what you'll see there is 100 different wines in one serving. Might be closed and not showing a lot when it's very, very cold. And then as it slowly warms up, as you're swirling away, you'll see different nuances emerge, and you'll see the wine emerge. But as a loose rule, lighter reds, I'm probably around 16 degrees, and that generally translates to 15 to 20 minutes in the fridge before you serve it. Full-bodied reds, I still like them when they touch your lips. They should be cooler than the ambient conditions that you're in. So 18, and then they'll warm up a few degrees. And whites, I think the aromatic whites can be straight out of the fridge. I think that's when they're most refreshing, although they may not look as aromatic as they could be once they warm up a little bit. But I think that sensation of something nice and cold at the end of the day, and then let it warm up a little bit. And Chardonnays tend to be a little bit warmer, maybe 8 to 10 degrees. But I wouldn't get too hung up on all this. Start too cold, use a large glass, and just let it warm up in the glass. That's the only thing that's going to happen once you take it out of the fridge.
And these things are not to be recommended with toddlers and small kids. I can personally attest
not
to
with
that.
me either. We have a fairly high attrition rate in our house with glassware. This guy can help you. Here's Ralph.
Oh, hey,
he's just
who's this? Ralph. Hey, Ralph.
That's Ralph, our youngest. He's getting ready for school.
Good man. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Another question here from 8464. Do you recommend the use of an aerator?
I think you can. I mean, some of those tools can really change a wine rapidly. And if your drinking window each evening is so compressed that you need instant results from a wine that happens to be closed, might be under the screw cap and needs a bit of air and needs a bit of opening up, then an aerator may help. But like all these things, we can overcomplicate things a lot of the time, and you could really just pour into a large glass like Eamon's got there, and let nature do its work, and just hold it and continually swirl the wine and experience it that way. So both techniques can work. An aerator could get you there quicker, but I'm part of the slow wine movement, and a large glass will do the same job.
Okay, very good. This question from Jill, is the negativity around boxed wine valid?
Not really. I think plastic technology that we used to have in the boxes was probably a bit dodgy. We didn't know the dangers of a lot of bad plastics, like things like BPAs, phthalates. They secrete estrogen at alarming levels, that sort of thing. But that technology has changed, and the plastics we're using in the food and beverage industry now are very, very safe. And so really, I remember back in the 80s here in New Zealand, even the whiteware companies, the fridge companies made our fridges to accommodate the 4-litre box. So there was actually a compartment in the fridge, and the box was there, and they were fantastic devices for disguising how much you consumed each evening, because you just kept topping up from the 4-litre box in the fridge, and there was no evidence to show how much you had the night before. So I think they were supremely intelligent devices from that point of view. But from a technical point of view, they should be a very, very efficient delivery system from the producer to the consumer. But because of our experiences in the 80s and the wines we put in those boxes, it might take the populace a long time to come back to that technology and accept that fine wine could be delivered that way. But technically, no, they should be fine.
That's good to hear. Beats a cold water and ice tap in your fridge anyway. I like the sounds of that.
Yeah.
Another question here around why can't all wines be veggie or vegan?
It comes down to fining agents, and the fining agents are used to clarify and sometimes soften the wines, and the proteins and tannins in wines react with introduced proteins. And some of the most traditional ones that have been used over the centuries are things like milk, bull's blood was a common one not so long ago. Really? So casein, which is milk protein. Then you've got isinglass, which is an extract from the swim bladder of a fish. And all of these things have been used for centuries to clarify wines, eggs as well. as we've tried to, maybe accommodate vegans and vegetarians, some of those things have dropped away. But I think what people don't understand is those natural fining agents. If your wine has been labeled vegan, it's probably been fined with something synthetic instead. And although it may not have the animal element in the wine, you may be disappointed to know what was used instead. And the wine industry worldwide has a free pass for some reason to not have to put the ingredients on the back label like all other food and beverages. I'm baffled as to why. I would actually like that practice to come in, because my wines have very, very low uses of additives. And I know many wines have a huge list of additives, and the back label would have to get commensurately larger to accommodate all the things that they're using. So I think it would be a level the playing field around the world and would separate the wines made by craft versus the industrial wines. But I'm off the topic a little bit there. But yeah, we use things like casein, egg white, isinglass, and these are all from animals. The one thing I'll point out is we have to put on the, we have to say it's had egg or milk added, but nothing remains in the wine. So if you're concerned about consuming animal products, nothing remains in the wine. We rack the wine off and filter after using those products. So if that's your concern, it's not in that bottle of wine.
Very good. Okay. How long does a wine stay good after opening, if it possibly lasts past the first evening?
Yep, it varies a lot. The Pinot you've got there, Eamon, is from a lighter vintage in Martaborough, a lighter wine, and that one needs to be opened and drunk on the night. And I know you have no issues with that. But most wines, especially if they're youthful, fresh, like the next vintage of my Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Gris, you can open it up, drink half the bottle and put it in the fridge, and 3 days later, it's actually sometimes even better. Really? So it really, really depends, and there's no rule of thumb. It's just going to have to be one of those things. But generally, the younger the vintage, the longer it will be fresh once it's opened. Very old wines can be very, very brief experiences once they're opened, and this is why I'm kind of against decanting old red wines, especially great ones that you've carried around the world or you've kept for a long time for a special occasion, and then you decant it and put it on the mantelpiece for dinner 2 hours later. That's a terrible, terrible thing to do to an old wine, because often those wines are very, very brief experiences in the presence of oxygen or air, and you don't want to miss that moment when it was actually showing its best, which is often just a few minutes after opening. And again, I come back to the large glassware, pour it out, put it to your nose straight away, and watch it change. But yes, generally good fresh young wines should be good for 2 to 3 days open in the fridge. Obviously,
that's great. I didn't realize that at all. That's great. Low alcohol wines. A lot of people ask us for low alcohol wines, Rod. And comments around alcohol levels are creeping up everywhere. Can you make a decent 7-8% alcohol wine?
No. The reason we drink wine is because of the alcohol, not just the effect on you as a person, but the effect on the palate. And the reason wine is because it does have alcohol. If it doesn't have much alcohol, it's not actually wine. So wine, the alcohol does have a flavor. If you've tasted pure alcohol, it's actually quite sweet. But the other thing is it provides weight, and it's warming, and it's slippery on the palate, and that's what gives wine its supple characteristics in the palate. I'm just going to move out of the sun here, and so I think it comes down to levels of alcohol. And I know there's a lot of work going on in the industry to try and produce lower alcohol wines, because we hear from the market that that's a requirement. But everyone that's done it makes that wine and it doesn't sell. And I think my best advice is, because the manipulation that's required to produce a low alcohol wine often relies on some heavy technology to remove the alcohol once it's made, or you pick the grapes earlier, hence unripe, less flavor, or you compensate for the lack of alcohol with sugar. And equally, people don't want more sugar in their wines. Sugar maybe physiologically is a bigger evil than the alcohol. So my advice is, and it comes down to your occasion often, you know, you want to try that wine, but you don't want the 14% alcohol, is the best thing to do is add a drop of water. You've taken a very, very good wine that's been made really well with ripe grapes, but you don't want the heaviness, then add 10% or 20% water, and you've got your low alcohol wine without all the manipulation that on a producer's side that we would have to do. So I'm a little bit angry at our own industry has allocated tens of millions of dollars of our levies and fees and excise to research low alcohol production wines, when, you know, all you need to do is just add a drop of water to a fine wine and you've got a low alcohol wine with all the flavors and ripeness that the winemaker intended, but in a more palatable guise for that particular occasion. And you know, spritzers and things used to be a very, very popular choice, and I have no issue with that. I have no issue with someone in Florida or in the south of France adding, you know, a good ice cube to their glass of wine. It just makes perfect sense, and it comes back to those silly rules that were embedded in some book somewhere about how you're meant to drink wine. You drink it any way you like, and if you want it with low alcohol, just add a little bit of water.
I would never have thought of doing that, but it makes perfect sense. And one of the life's great pleasures is a nice chilled glass of rosé with a couple of ice cubes in, and obviously that adds water over time. So total sense.
Yeah. The other option is you don't actually have to add it to the wine. You just have a glass of water next to your glass of wine, and after you finish your glass of wine, have a glass of water, and you're effectively drinking half the alcohol if you're substituting that glass of wine. So I think people are looking for the producer to provide an answer for the age-old question of, you know, how much alcohol you should consume. But the end of the day, if you're on the slippery slope that we all are, that we decided to partake of alcohol in our youth, and we're forever in it, it just comes back down to that self-control. Do I need that last glass before I go to bed? And I fail as often as the rest of us.
Question here from Gordon: how much sulfites should be added or are added to wines? You know, a lot of people talk about sulfites and headaches, and are they allergic? What's going on there?
Yeah. So first off, I'll tell you, if we didn't have sulfur, wine would only be consumed at source within a few days of making it. So we would go back to the way wine was thousands of years ago, and people made it, and they drank it fresh, partially fermented, and you certainly couldn't transport it around the world to deliver to anyone else. So it's a necessary evil. As we've gotten better with our cooling in our wineries, with closures, better bottling technology, sulfur levels have come down over the years, and that's reflected in our legal limits as well. So when I started in the industry, you could have up to 300 milligrams per litre in a white wine, and I think it's down to 160 or 180 now. So it's half the legal limit that it was 20, 30 years ago. So we're doing better already. But when you add sulfur to wine, it appears in two forms, a bound form and a free form. And the bound form, like the name implies, binds to some of the elements in the wine and doesn't really do anything to the consumer. It's the free form that's available to bind to something that can cause damage to the consumer. So when you smell it and it's got a very, very high sulfur, you'll have that tightness in your chest or your throat. Some people are more sensitive than others, but generally you would have to get well over 50 or 60 milligrams per litre free to really have a serious effect on someone's breathing, and it's very rare for modern day wines to get anywhere close to that level once they reach a consumer. Reds generally have about half the levels that whites do. People often are surprised by that because they always blame that last glass of red at night for their headache the next morning. It might have been the bottle of wine you had before the glass of red at the end of the evening. And it's certainly not due to the sulfur in the red wines. So red wines have tannins, which provides an element of protection inherently to the wine. So reds require less sulfur. So generally we'll be bottling reds with 60 to 80 milligrams total, whereas whites are more like 100 to 140 total. So, but these levels have come way down, and since even 20 years ago. So as you can imagine, as a winemaker, we are very aware of it because we add it and use it in the winery. So we know what it could do to us, and so we're very careful with it, and we're very careful with it when we add it to wines when we're thinking about the consumer as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, sure does. Okay, we're almost out of time. Rod, I gotta ask, last time we caught up on one of these with Ben Darno, that was the launch, I think, of your Darno Easthope Sauvignon Blanc project. I think it's taken the naked world by storm. And I hear a rumor that there may be a new project afoot. Could you maybe shed some light on it for all of us on that?
Well, it's pretty easy to narrow down what that project would be. There's very few things Ben could teach me about winemaking, and I point that out to him regularly. But there is one thing that they do very well in the south that we've probably troubled to emulate, and it's that southern French rosé style, that Provençal style, those bony, dry, pale rosés that when you pour in the glass go, oh, that shouldn't work, but they're just absolutely delicious. And so Ben has, we've sort of collaborated to produce a rosé here in New Zealand in that southern French style, much to match the Sauvignon. That's worked out so successfully to bring some New Zealand Kiwi nous to French Sauvignon Blanc production, which has just worked out so beautifully. I don't know if we could have dialed it up any better from concept to actually pouring into the glass. And we hope to do the same with a rosé. So Ben's been sent some samples from me, and samples are flying back and forth across the world, and he's provided some technique. And I'm very lucky we've got a young Frenchman here who's in one of the cellars I'm working in that has a great deal of experience. He's from the south of France with rosé, and so he's going to be assisting me as well. So we do have a Frenchman here on the ground that can take me through it as well. But I think there should be a sample in your office pretty shortly, actually, Eamon. So I think it looks pretty smart, and we're pretty close to what we could do there. So I'll have to bow to Ben's superiority on this one.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to try it, Rod. And thanks for getting that ahead. And yeah, just a great example of the naked community coming together, customers and winemakers, all in the name of good wine. So thanks very much tonight, Rod, for your morning, for dialing in. I think that was really informative. Learned lots there. Hope everyone took away at least one or two things that they didn't know before, and so great to be able to speak to an expert like yourself. So have a great day there, and hope those frosts stay away, and we'll speak to you soon, mate.
No, thanks, Eamon, and just thanks for everyone for joining. I know it's been a crazy year, and we haven't been able to connect in the normal way with our tours and that sort of thing. It's really been horrible in many ways just to be isolated in our little cells. Hopefully this world gets back to normal, and we can start ignoring that mainstream media alarmism and actually take back control of our lives soon and connect in the proper way. But in the meantime, thanks to the Naked platform for connecting us all in the meantime. So see you later, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Rod.